April 19th, 2019. VR Creator Lab 2019 Critique and Action Plan. VR Creator Lab asked for feedback in a survey, and this is what I sent. It makes for a nice recap of the 3 days of boot camp. We were staying at the Renaissance Hotel Airport in Los Angeles and taking an Uber each day to the YouTube campus about 15 minutes away in Playa Vista, California. Nobody likes a critic, so I offer this with considerable hesitation. The only reason I'm spending time on this is because I know that immersive experiences are the only way we will save the tiger and thus all species who live in their ecosystem known as planet Earth. I really consider AR and VR to be a matter of life or death. I can't begin to express how grateful I am that you chose Big Cat Rescue for the grant, the Zcam K1, this boot camp, and the continuing mentoring. I offer the following in hopes that future VR Creator Labs can build on what you are figuring out as you go. Which was their words. I think the best way is to go through your agenda and then offer the pros and cons from my perspective. Because we are kind of a weird case, though, my biggest suggestion would be to poll your candidates and either break your training into separate days or tracks. I spent way too much time thinking this doesn't apply to me. And I suspect that since we are one of your most successful channels in the room, if it doesn't apply to us, it really didn't apply to most others in the room. There were some real gems in what was offered, but you had to stay focused, despite so much of it being foreign, to grasp them. I'll explain that better later. Day 1, breakfast. The food was great and healthy, but you could have used another coffee dispenser or two. People did manage to find coffee elsewhere in the building when it kept running out. Malia made us feel welcome right away by coming over on day 1 and introducing herself. Other staff did the same throughout the days of boot camp, and that made us feel like we would have the support we needed afterward. Introductions. That went well, and you kept it moving along. I had previewed the other winners' channels to get to know them, and you might suggest that in the future, so that everyone has a sense of who is in the room that they may want to collaborate with. Virtual reality overview. I'm a nerd who has been pushing augmented reality since 2012, so I found it interesting, but I'm not sure I agree with the statement that we have to know where we came from before we know where we are going. It's true in many situations, but in AR and VR, I think it was actually demoralizing to realize that people have been working since the 1800s to get people to adopt this tech, and it's still not catching on the way we want it to. Maybe focusing this more on recent breakthroughs, like Oculus Go making it affordable, would help newcomers feel like they could crest this wave. Headset and camera demos. If you've had several other labs, I would think the issue of batteries not being charged and too many devices trying to connect to the internet all at once have happened before. I have my head in an Oculus every day and have spent some time in a Rift for editing purposes, but it appears that most in the room were not familiar with the devices and were frustrated by not being able to use them. Since all of the devices had the original passwords, there was no way to untangle that mess than to charge up and pair devices with the controllers before the event and give each a label of the device name and unique password so that everyone could connect. It was very helpful to us that your staff popped in to make sure we were trying different angles, distances, and light settings on the Zcam K1. It took 3 different people just to figure out how to connect it to our computer. Aha, there is a cable in the box. There were too many suggestions for using equipment such as a router or iPad that wasn't provided. It made it sound like using this camera was going to take a room full of hardware, which doesn't work for us outside trying to catch a cat in action. I understand that we aren't the normal case, but there seemed to be a lack of critical thinking about how to make the most of our situation with the camera. Our way of filming is typically to always be ready, because when we see a cat doing something fun, we have to catch it in the moment. Lunch. The food was excellent, and I really appreciated the vegetarian and vegan options. Creator Lab review. I think this was the part where someone gave all of the rules and maps for filming at the YouTube campus. A poll ahead of time would probably show that few, if any, of the cohorts would be doing that. Maybe the other people in the room were there for that. I really didn't understand who they were or why they were there. I assumed that a lot of the content was for them, since it didn't apply to the contest winners, but I could be wrong. This would be a good example of a breakout session. If you were going to film there, you could go hear about that, but the rest of us didn't need to hear it. We aren't local. Cameras and settings. This might be defined better through polling ahead of time too. Much of this talked about ISO and shutter speeds, and while I know the phrases, my team doesn't have a photographer on it, despite the fact that we've been shooting videos since the first handycams came out in the early 90s. There's probably a wide range of people in the room on this one, so maybe having a cheat sheet of best choices for ISO and shutter speed, and whatever else can be manipulated on the particular camera would be helpful. Something like indoor fluorescent lighting, choose X, or outside shade, choose X. What we need to know is how to make the most of the options for the specific camera gives us and what pitfalls to be aware of. Matt did a good job of giving some of those gems, like noting that the camera sees the ceiling and will adjust the whole scene for the brightness of the overhead light. Another gem was his framing template for the iPad monitor. I don't know how many times people use the word plating, which I'd never heard, and it wasn't until there was an animated GIF on screen that I got what it meant. I still have no idea how to do it, which would have been important to know since everyone runs into the issue of one part of their scene being overlit. Hands-on camera workshop. See demo section above. We wasted far too much time trying to connect the cameras to our computers and phones. If we had been guided through this, step by step, in the classroom type setting, we could then be set loose to figure out distances and angles for filming. This should probably come after the filming considerations, production and pre-production training though, so we didn't waste time making novice mistakes. Day 2, filming considerations. If this was the section where it showed the field of view of the camera and talked about the areas of potential warping, that was very helpful. Knowing the depth of field is extremely helpful. We have learned this the hard way with the cats through trial and error. So if we'd known up front that the cat really has to be somewhere between 1.5 and 6 feet away for best experience, we could have saved a lot of processing time. We just hadn't found that sort of advice online anywhere. Insta360. I was so impressed with the Evo that I ordered one during the break. We have a couple of the older Insta cameras that we will be trading in for a second Evo. Given how much you are investing in each of us, and the fact that the Evo is under $500, I think it would have been a good gift for cohorts for 2 reasons. 1, it will help with the framing of the Z-Cam, and that tip was golden. 2, it gives a second camera angle and a lot more versatility for motion, action, and portability, which will only make your cohort's content that much better. Granted, you gave us more than enough money to do it ourselves, but polling in 6 months might be of interest to you to see how many used the grant to buy the Evo or something similar for the purpose of creating better content. Yeah, the Evo turned out to be way better than that Zycam camera that cost a bloody fortune that they gave us. We were very happy to meet Michael Chabon and ask him all about the trouble we have had with the Insta Pro 2. We spent upwards of $5,000 for what may as well be a bowling ball on our desk because support is in Chinese and unresponsive. The main reason for buying it was the promise of editing in Premiere and only pulling proxies into the program and then only rendering what we actually needed. We have never been able to get that to work and have horrible ghosting that we learned yesterday may be the HDR setting. I'm hoping that having an English-speaking contact will help us deal with those issues. I'd love more training on this and in the Insta software. We have played around with tiny planets but could use a lot more help. Production. I think the polling of the cohorts would show that none of us hires production managers, lighting crews, drone pilots, script writers, art directors, special effects professionals, or actors, although there may be guests or even minor celebrities on occasion. Maybe the non-cohorts in the room work at that level. At one point, the instructor asked about one element of the above, and only 2 people in the room raised their hands. I think the instructor tried, on the fly, to try and make the point that even if you are a 1 to 3 man team, you still need to know what all of those people do so that you can do it. That's probably where this segment should start and focus. All of those things need to be considered, but I think flipping it from saying, if you don't have these big teams of people, then you need to do it yourself, to you need to do all these things and then hand it off to others as you grow. Then teach us how to all do those things. We can't start backwards by just knowing those parts exist. There were some gems in this, like saying that the LED lights are cheaper and lighter than before, but we need to know which lights work in which conditions and where do we find them, and what do we need to know about how to light a scene to prevent the blowout from the camera seeing more than just the area of focus. We are counting on your expertise to tell us which brands and the best qualities and where to find them. The eBay suggestion for the Pilot Fly H2 gimbal was exactly what I needed to know and ordered one at the break after I got to see yours in action, and asked how it compared to the Ronin, which was 3 times more expensive and not compatible out of the box with the Zcam housing. That was a true gem. Another gem, which should be a handout, is the SD card slot list that gave a place for the time of the shot and what might be particularly good to keep or note to discard the whole segment rather than having to watch all of the footage all over again. The SSD drives were another gem, but I've never used one, so I could use a lot more info on how that works as a storage drive, who makes the most reliable ones, etc. Pre-production seems to me like this should be covered before production, as the name implies. Group photo. I know it's like herding cats, and I'm really glad we got this opportunity to remember the people involved. You might consider having a break, so everyone goes to the bathroom, makes their calls, etc., and then call everyone back into the room for a short presentation, just to round them all up, and then march them into the photo op spots as a group. Ending at 3 p.m. seems wasteful for so many of us who traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to be here. If there were 2 more hours of planned working with the cameras and the software, it would be better use of time than just leaving us to our own devices. Day 3. I don't know what's coming from day 3 yet, so maybe these things will be covered. I think the storytelling aspect is where we fail the most, and I suspect the same is true for others. I love the graph of the storyline, but I think a lot more needs to go into teaching storytelling. There's a great podcast called Story Brand, so you might consider someone from there speaking in the future. I listen to that podcast all the time. There is a great you mentioned that our fans want to feel like they know us, and I really do think that's been the key to our success. We've always had amazing content because our cats are just beautiful, but we saw a huge shift in the past 4 years by dedicating staff to answering every question asked of us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are stepping up now with Pinterest and LinkedIn and in Minds, which Minds no longer exists, I don't think. Due to the headset issue, this may not turn out to be the same for augmented reality and virtual reality, but if anyone does go to the bother of asking a question or commenting on an AR or VR video, then we should all acknowledge them as super fans and talk back to them. Pre-production workshop. Seems like all the pre-production stuff should go in advance of the production stuff. My favorite movie was Memento, but that's because most plots are too easy to figure out. And it's because that whole movie goes in reverse. Training should be done consecutively, I think. Post-production and editing. This sort of step-by-step tutorial is exactly what is needed. We don't need to hear about all the ways we aren't going to use. It's too much chatter. We just need to hear what we should be learning to do this first stage of learning VR 180 in as concise and organized a manner as possible. The big screen in the middle of the room is only really visible to the center of the room and the first couple of rows, so there should be 3 screens across a group this size, and even then it's not going to be visible to those in the back half of the room. The glare was a big problem the first 2 days, better on days 3 with the shades down, but still a lot of glare from overhead lights. It was helpful to have roaming mentors come and answer specific questions, which would be so different depending on the types of video a channel is doing. Having Andy come by and ask if we needed to hire anyone was also helpful. Not that we have any plan to do so, but nice to know you guys are a resource if needed. Advanced VR 180 Post. Of all the things it could or should have been a breakout session for those to whom it applied, I don't think that breaking up Advanced VR 180 Post and immersive contents makes sense, because I'm guessing we all need to know how to do both. I won't know until I see what they both contain by sending 2 of my team to one and 1 to the other and then comparing notes. My team members reported that this was helpful because it was a step-by-step walkthrough of Mystica, Mocha, After Effects, and other software. They were a bit overwhelmed by the monthly subscription costs and learning curve. We have a few years' experience in filming and editing immersive video, and we found it to be like drinking from a fire hose, so I can't even imagine what those new to this hardware and software must have felt like. I think you get better results by sticking to Adobe products since those work well together and can be bundled relatively easily. I'd also suggest only covering the bare minimums for turning out a video so that the people can build on that skill with some confidence. Immersive content workshop. It was nice to hear what other creators are considering, but it would have been a lot more informative to hear from people who have already found compelling ways to tell stories in VR 180. Things I'd still like to know or see. 1 channel or multiple Do you lose a lot of subscribers if they get sent footage that is blurry because it belongs in a headset? Can you, and this is a question I still have because we have 3 channels for our different types of videos, and I don't think that that's a good idea. Can YouTube segment the emails by playlist so that people can choose only to be alerted? This is something they so need. Can YouTube segment the emails by playlist so that people can choose to only be alerted to the kind of content they want? We have 5 channels back then, which is a huge waste of our time and resources just to be sure our fans get what they expect. What is the best way in the first 5 seconds to tell people to grab a headset? It seems there should be some graphic overlay that really takes over the screen to let people know up front that it isn't a flat film. I'd really like wiggle graphics to work as thumbnails, as a visual cue that is ubiquitous across all of YouTube that this video is immersive. Could each playlist have its own default text? Oculus YouTube app, does it break down by topic, animals, fashion, animated? Our team's first draft and 4 videos. Volunteer perspective. Start with volunteers and their stories, then switch to viewing them working with cats. Include advocates who are part of the family too. Could be a series, do couples and how people move here from all over. Could this be all multiple episodes? Vet perspective. Using visuals of the entire process from darting to surgery and recovery, but have Justin talking about what it's like to be a big cat vet and how it's not his day job. Kittens and how big cats are like little cats. From pickup to drop off, promote fostering, talk about Sky the bobcat, bottle feeding, weaning, litter training, show how little cats are just like big cats, just a lot more dangerous. Feeding, enrichment, and operant. Talk about what and why while showing it. Contrast how captive cats have no life choices, so we try to give them some choices they can enjoy. Discuss why cats don't belong in cages and how augmented reality and virtual reality can change that. If you're enjoying my diary, please like, share, and subscribe. You can find other ways to connect to me over at bigcatrescue.org/Carole.Baskin.